Good Sunday morning and welcome to WGN-TV Political Report. I'm Paul Lisnick. 1 year ago this week, Chicago voters picked Brandon Johnson to take the helm of City Hall, seeking change after 4 years under the leadership of Lori Lightfoot. A new book takes readers through Lightfoot's rise to power, recounting her time in office with a painstaking attention to detail. From constant tension with colleagues to the COVID-19 pandemic, rising violence on Chicago streets, and turmoil at the police department, Lightfoot's turbulent term led an unprecedented electoral loss to result, with the incumbent not even advancing to the April runoff in her bid for re-election. The book is called The City is Up for Grabs: How Chicago Mayor Lori Lightfoot Led and Lost a City in Crisis. Author Gregory Pratt joins me this morning to talk all about it. Greg, good to see you.
Thank you for having me.
Congratulations on the book. It reads almost like a fiction book. I mean, just really easy to read as you go through that, and it's a story. It's like you're a fly on the wall, so let's get to it. First, let's talk about the title, The City is Up for Grabs. You actually write about that in the book, and you say it's actually from a text that Lightfoot sent during the 2020 riots, which was a major inflection point for the city. Why'd you pick that for the title?
I think that it represented the problems that the city was facing under her tenure, not just with the riots, which was a literal city up for grabs, but when Rahm Emanuel stepped aside and Ed Burke went down, these were two major pillars of the city's power structure. The city was in political turmoil, which is where she ended up grabbing the football, the fumbled ball, and she becomes the mayor. And then when she lost, the city was also up for grabs, where she unleashed these two poles in Paul Vallas and Brandon Johnson, the right and the left in the city of Chicago. And now the teachers union is running the city essentially, and you have a new paradigm. Whether it'll last or not, who knows? But the city for the last 5 years has been up for grabs.
Hence the title. Now, much of the book is your firsthand reporting, so we get that extensive details. As I said before, it's like you're a fly on the wall. But here's the thing. Lightfoot did not talk to you for this book. In fact, you said you've not talked to her since, right? The book has come out. And so for those who aren't familiar with how a reporter puts some of this together, how did you get the kind of extensive detail you have from the beginning of her run for mayor all the way through the end of her service? You weren't everywhere.
You'd be surprised.
Maybe you were.
So I remember when I first started covering City Hall, they joked to me that they thought that Fran Spillman at the Sun-Times had the place wired because she was everywhere. And I thought, that's what I want to do. And I had a lot of sources. I interviewed dozens of people, including people who worked at a high level in her administration, rivals. I had, through the Freedom of Information Act, 4 years of text messages and emails. So where I didn't interview her directly, I have it in her direct words. And then, of course, as I talk about it in the book, Mayor Lightfoot and I had a very good relationship, and then she got angry at me for some of my reporting and she stopped talking to me. But I have significant insight there as well from our time together, and I got to know her pretty well.
Well, you describe her as a hard-charging prosecutor, true enough statement, with a mean streak. That's your phrase. A lot of Chicago politicians have endured reputations in this city as tough to deal with, but you uncover some pretty shocking moments that you detail in the book. Text members with aldermen and staff, and even an argument with former President Obama. Just talk a little about that.
You know, it's funny. She was upset that about that anecdote from what I hear through the grapevine about her conversation with President Obama. I think she looks good in the anecdote. Here's the deal. They're meeting at the NBA All-Star Game in 2020, right before COVID shuts down, and they're having a conversation about a bunch of different things. And the subject of the Obama Center, which had been delayed, and there was issues about whether or not there'd be a benefit agreement for renters in Woodlawn so that the people who are there don't get pushed out. And he's frustrated by the delays, and she is talking about, well, you don't understand. I'm the mayor, and I'm here, and you're not, and I have to care about this. And he said that he respected where she was coming from. So it's heated, but it's not that heated. It wasn't disrespectful. I think they were both going well together, but it's one of my favorite little chapters, and I think she looks pretty well in that. But it's somebody described it as she confronted him, and I don't think that's quite fair to her or to him. But it's a frank conversation.
And she'll see it from different eyes, perhaps, than other people. There's a thread that runs throughout this book, and you make a clear point that, unlike Rahm Emanuel and others, I mean, she was not a legislator, right? Even other people that had tough reputations similar to hers. So talk about how that gap and that absence of experience impacted her ability to get things done.
Well, people think about Mayor Daley, the second Mayor Daley, and they think that he inherited it from his dad or something, which there is a little bit of truth to. He has the famous last name. He was a state senator, he was the state's attorney, and then he became mayor. He had lost a race for mayor before he becomes mayor. He has all of this extensive experience. And there's some talk in the book early on, some aldermen like Harry Osterman and Brendan Riley come to help her work with Springfield, and they're trying to get her to understand, and so does Gil Villegas, that you have to build these relationships. It's not as simple as I'm the mayor, I call, and they say, well, that's the mayor, and they called. And so she didn't quite understand the way power worked there. In fact, she was a little naive about it.
Let's talk about COVID a little bit. It's such a major part of the book and of her legacy. It will be. It's the challenge nobody wanted to have, right? But she was stuck with it. There was some reporting at the time about her broken relationship with Governor Pritzker. You go into far more detail on that in the book. She didn't want closures to happen, but she was proud of closing the lakefront, which you say actually is a good snapshot of her leadership. How so?
Well, where she deserves some credit is that she and the governor disagreed, but they came together because they didn't want to do a circus like what was happening in New York with the governor there and the mayor of New York there, which they were fighting in public all the time. She decided, though, to close down the lakefront, and she kept it closed long after it was clear that this is a virus that spreads indoors, and people should be outdoors, people should be walking outdoors, and she just wouldn't have it. So she kept it closed stubbornly for no great reason, and that stubbornness of I made a decision and I'm going to stick to it, it carried over in situations, maybe most notably with the police superintendent, David Brown, who was not... there are not a lot of people that think he did a good job in Chicago, and she didn't want to admit she got that one wrong either.
I do want to talk about her relationship with CTU. Always contentious, but you tell this fascinating story about when she goes to visit former CTU President Karen Lewis, who of course was very ill after Lightfoot was elected. On the surface, a pleasant meeting, but I read that chapter and went, oh my goodness, what happens when Lightfoot leaves?
She is very upset that Stacey Davis Gates, who is now the president of the teachers union, had shown up to this meeting, and she didn't want to see Stacey there. In fact, she shifts her seat so that she doesn't have to look at Stacey Davis Gates. And she has a pleasant enough conversation with Karen Lewis. Karen tells her that her mom looked great in her pink suit at the inauguration. They talk a little bit about some pleasantries. Karen tries to say that, you can work with Stacey, and then and Lori felt blindsided. Yeah. She comes out. She's cussing about Stacey Davis Gates. This will shock your listeners. She does not like Stacey Gates.
Yeah, that may be news for some. I don't know. Look, finally, just have a moment left. You're a reporter. The book is not intended to be critical of Lightfoot, nor do you intend to praise her. But you do say there's one lesson to glean from her story for aspiring politicians. Really briefly, what's the lesson?
I think that you have to adapt and work with people. If you come in as the prosecutor, fine, but you can't be the prosecutor all the time. And the way you get elected is not always the way you stay elected. And you have to understand that the world changes and that every relationship is different.
Well, Gregory Royal Pratt, didn't know that was your middle name. Congratulations. The book is The City Up for Grabs. It's in bookstores everywhere. I read it cover to cover, and it's really interesting. Congratulations on this. I think you're going to have good success with this. Coming up next on WGN TV Political Report.
Increasing numbers of workers are deciding that the job is just not worth the pay. This is the real threat in the restaurant industry.
This is a solution to a problem that doesn't exist.
Will Illinois lawmakers find compromise on a plan to eliminate the sub-minimum wage statewide? Inside the debate going on in Springfield when we come back. Don't go anywhere.